are doing. So, you see, there was just one previous video, or maybe the one before that, that had this one comment that said I shouldn't say bloody, because the word bloody, because I apparently sound previous century British. And now look, the comment as a whole was meant as a compliment, so thank you for that. It means a lot. If you're watching, well, you have my gratitude. Now, just sound British, just sound truly British. I don't think bloody is enough. No. You gotta do something more. I gotta say something like, "Oi, you bloody twat, come here and bring a glass of water." Look, I love the British accent. You might have guessed this already, right? I do indeed love all of them. There are multiple British accents, if you didn't know already, and man, I really like it. I understand mine isn't pure, obviously. You don't gotta remind me, I know. It's kind of a mix up, and that's just the way it is. It's just the way the water flows, so to speak, or water flows. Regardless, look, I love the accent, and yeah. On a more serious note, we finally have 4K 60 on the front cameras. The final update, it finally showed up on the X100 Pro. The Xiaomi 14, unsurprisingly almost, it comes in right out the box. Can you believe that? With 4K 60 on the front cameras. Not that it takes selfie videos outside of camera comparison, but still, it's always nice to have, right? Alright, now let's take a look at cinematic video or portrait video, whatever you want to call it. So, you might notice that the Xiaomi 14 doesn't have cinematic video or any kind of background blur happening. Now, that is a bit of a concern because I couldn't really find any settings. I scoured it. There is a movie mode which has cinematic video for the rear cameras. We'll get to that. But for the front cameras, there's really nothing. Now, if there is a setting hidden somewhere deep down in the underground, then yeah, please let me know because I couldn't really find anything. Now, well, look, as much as I don't really like to promote cinematic video on any phone because I think even a single issue would basically spoil the entire clip for me. That's a bit of a nitpick maybe, but that's just the way I think things work. However, I do think that the X100 Pro is quite possibly one of the best when it comes to cinematic video. Like, it's damn near flawless. Not quite there yet to absolute perfection, but very close. Alright, rear camera portrait video on both. And yes, this one we actually have on both. I don't know why the selfie video is not there, but well, regardless. I'm going to keep this short and sweet because I've been yapping on forever, and obviously I have no idea how this looks. I'll let you peeps know in a while, and yeah, there's really not much else for me to talk about, so let's get to it. Alright, so, well, I think it's pretty obvious that there's only one phone that's handling itself really well in the given lighting situation. It was obviously a bit of a challenge, as you can tell, but man, the amount of noise on the Xiaomi 14, it is through the roof. It is insane. But that is not the only problem on the Xiaomi 14, as you can tell, or you probably would have heard by now. So here's what happened. I use the frontal mic option on the selfie video for the Xiaomi 14. You would expect, just as anyone in their right mind, that frontal mic settings would result in significantly better audio, maybe better noise reduction at the very bare minimum. But that just, yeah, it sounds horrendous. I mean, damn. Even the volume was clipping so bad that I had to lower it in the editor before exporting it, like manually. It was pretty bad, it was pretty rough on the Xiaomi 14. Now, I didn't take any regular microphone audio. Obviously, I didn't really think it would be this much of a problem, not even close. I don't think anyone expected that. But I will take regular audio next time when I compare it against the OnePlus 12. It's coming real soon, so just have a little patience for that. I don't want to do a whole new recording for this one purpose. If you were to look at portrait video, with selfie camera, there's only the X100, and yes, as you would expect, even with 1080p, it's kind of insane how good 1080p can look on the X100 Pro, even though we technically have 4K now. But the X100 Pro is really good with the quality in general. Whether it's 4K or 1080p, you can actually get some really nice looking shots, and again, Xiaomi is horribly noisy. Now the rear camera portrait, which we do have on both, it actually looks pretty good, I think actually. Fact is this, the X100 Pro selfie portrait video looks better and had better edge detection, as opposed to the rear camera, which is odd, but that really is the case, and it's a little surprising. Also, the quality, turns out, is actually looking a little bit better with the Xiaomi 14. I'm not really sure for the reasoning behind it, but that's just the way it goes again. Now then, let's get to the meat of the matter, because we're going to take a look at what is arguably the most important, main camera 4K 30. And yeah, it's surprisingly similar, and it looks absolutely tremendous on both. I honestly have no real complaints, and even when backlit by the sun, you can see it looks really good on both. There's just nothing to complain about, and both are performing really well. No contrast balance issues, there's no exposure problems, nothing, it just works. To be fair, that is exactly what I expect from the X100 Pro, but the Xiaomi 14, costing less and actually performing just as well, is quite something. If anything, when I took a regular 4K without the backlight, the Xiaomi 14 actually, I think, has slightly better contrast, just a little bit better than the X100 Pro, which already does have really good balance and contrast with the exposure and all that jazz. The Xiaomi 14 is pulling ahead by just a hair, and that's quite something. Now with the ultra-wide camera, it's a very similar story again. I mean, look at this. This is technically just a little backlit because the sun is right there in the background and it's kind of dipping in and out. And you can tell both of these are rock solid. They don't look weird, they don't look unprofessional with the exposure. They can just handle situations really well. These are very difficult situations that most people will not normally shoot in, but it's not a problem on either. And I think with the ultrawide, at the very least, it does appear that Xiaomi has more exposure in the shadows, like just brighter shadows in general. Not like it has way more detail as opposed to the X100 or anything, but you could consider that the Xiaomi 14 is doing the exact opposite with the ultrawide camera as it was doing with the main camera, which is to say more contrast with the main camera, less with the ultrawide. That's all there is. Now, as for versatility, both of these phones are basically on par because the Xiaomi 14 has the ultrawide camera, it has the main camera, and then it has a 3.2x zoom, which is a very high quality zoom, although the white balance is completely off. It is way too warm and looks just a little weird. No doubt about that, but it's very good as you would expect, and you can kind of walk around with it. Not too much, obviously. You gotta be very ginger with your steps, but you can walk around a little bit. It can definitely handle it to a fair extent. Now with the X100 Pro, very similar story. You have the ultrawide camera, the main camera, and of course that 4.3x telephoto. Slightly higher zoom range, but it's not gonna make a massive difference, especially when it comes to video. And well, when you have more zoom range, of course, you don't really have as much stabilization as the Xiaomi 14. Now, there is another little complaint I have the Xiaomi 14, I didn't really mention back there, but you can just snap to the focal length that you want on the X100 Pro. You can't do that, you have to use a slider with the Xiaomi 14. And that bothers me a lot. It has always bothered me, it is always going to bother me, it doesn't matter which phone it is, and I really wish we had, yes fine, give me a slider, but also give me the exact zoom option, like the 1x, the 3.2x, and the 0.6x. Now then, let's take a look at focusing. So yes, indeed, I absolutely forgot to do it outdoors, so we are gonna take care of it indoors. And it works well. This is not exactly an easy subject. Glass is never a particularly easy subject for focusing, and you know, it's working more than well enough on the Xiaomi 14. If anything, I guess it's like a pinch slower in some of the cases when we're just racking back and forth from the background to the foreground. But yeah, for the most part, it works really well. You're not gonna have any problems focusing. Now the X100 Pro, I do want to point this out. It seems like the X100 is a little bit overexposed in the highlights, particularly the contrast looks good, but the highlights are not being controlled as well as the Xiaomi 14. Other than that, the focusing itself is actually really good, as you would expect on the X100. It's fantastic with video, through and through. I do want to get that point across, because it's not really advertised by Vivo all that much, but the X100 is absolutely stunning with video, and you can tell the focusing works really well. If anything, I think the racking from the background to the foreground and vice versa, it works a little bit better as opposed to the Xiaomi 14. Just a pinch, not a massive difference, but the speed definitely is a little bit higher. Now thus far, I didn't even mention this, completely forgot, but the Xiaomi 14, it has something called HDR video. It's not Dolby Vision or anything, we'll get to that. To be fair, it does look like in some of the spots, at least when using 4K 60 and I'm taking a backlit shot, the X100 does seem to have consistently better shadow detail. Now it kind of fixed itself in a manner of speaking in the last bit, but yeah, the HDR is definitely a bit of an issue. It can be a bit of an issue on the Xiaomi 14 when you're shooting 4K 60 and above. Now with the ultrawide camera, you can see that issue exacerbated that much more. The shadows are just completely crushed. It's not high contrast or anything like that, it's just crushed shadows. And we did not have this problem with the ultrawide camera. You just saw it a moment ago with 4K 30. So it does go to show that HDR video, it's not a gimmick obviously, it works really well with 4K 30, but at 4K 60, unfortunately it doesn't work as well. The X100 doesn't have any such issue, it just has good dynamic range through and through, which is quite impressive. Now the super stable video, so Look, stabilization as a whole is not the best on the X100 Pro, but it is very similar in this comparison. For the sake of this comparison, it's basically the same. If anything at all, I feel like there are maybe a few more jerks making it into Xiaomi's video. Also, you might have noticed by now that 1080p, even the resolution is the same. The 1080p super stable video looks way better, way higher quality on the X100 Pro. Something about the 1080p on the X100 Pro, it is insanely good. I don't know how they do it, but bravo. Now the Xiaomi doesn't look quite as good, and the fact that the stabilization isn't better at the very least is also a bit of a concern. And yes, unlike the X100 Pro, on the Xiaomi 14 you can actually use the ultra-wide camera, which does improve stabilization, sure, but given the fact that the 1080p, even the main camera, the quality wasn't all that good, the ultra-wide camera, as you would expect, has way lower quality. Like, it is at a point where I just wouldn't even consider using it, even though it does have better stabilization. The ultra-wide's 1080p super stable, it doesn't work. It's way too low of a quality for me to even consider it. Now 8K video on the other hand, so the X100 Pro has probably some of the best 8K video that you can get. I think the only one that rivals 8K on the X100 is the S24 Ultra, as far as I can remember. Now the Xiaomi 14 on the other hand, I think it's good, but it definitely could use a bit more enhancement in the stabilization department, because you can tell the X100 Pro has significantly less of those jerks making it into the shot, while the Xiaomi 14 is definitely struggling a little bit more. Now the Dolby Vision HDR, see, the one thing that is kind of sorely lacking on the X100 Pro is any form of HDR video recording, whether it's Dolby Vision, HDR10+, whatever. You don't really get any real options for those. On the Xiaomi 14 we have Dolby Vision, and it looks good, sure, but I think the exposure balance isn't fine-tuned. Like the regular 4K 30 video that I took with the basic HDR enabled that gave us good dynamic range, that looked better than the Dolby Vision, which is not something you would expect. You would expect the opposite. Dolby Vision should always look way better, way nicer. But that's not really quite happening now, is it? But now let's talk about what is possibly, not possibly, it is absolutely the best damn thing that exists on the Xiaomi 14. It has a bloody log mode. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of log. It's a stunning thing to have. And so far, among the smartphones that I have, it was only the iPhone that could do log video, and it was beautiful log ProRes video that we could get from that, and it was incredible. But now the Xiaomi 14, which is so much cheaper than most of the iPhones that you can buy, even that can do log. So that's just a beautiful thing for me. And I mean, you can tell, right? You can grade it to high heaven and back. I don't think it's quite as high quality as ProRes log that we get from the iPhone. That thing takes the entirety of my storage. Obviously, the Xiaomi 14's log doesn't really do as much. But it's still stunning, and it didn't really break the image apart. It looks really good, really clean. And even with such a strong grade, it works out so well. I really like that. I really like that we actually have a fairly budget option and you can still get log video from the Xiaomi 14. It's a beautiful thing. Hell, I would even go so far as to say that the existence of the log mode propels the Xiaomi 14 so far ahead that it actually overtakes the X100 Pro in terms of regular video for my own personal usage. Anyways, enough of me raving about that log mode. Let's talk about the details in 4K 30. So we are just simply going to crop into 500% on this 4K 30 video, and you can tell it's a slightly different approach to the processing of the video. The X100 Pro goes for more noise reduction, which is why we have way less grain and noise, but it is also lacking in a bit of the finer details, the finer sharpness that we still have, or rather the Xiaomi is still retaining because it's not trying to reduce the noise all that much. Now, which approach you like, I'm just going to leave it up to you, because this can really depend on personal taste. And also bear in mind, this is a 500% crop. On a smartphone's video, I don't know how many people are actually going to even care about a 500% crop. And now let's take a look at 8K. The subject is the same, which also gives us a fair idea about how much more detail you can get when you're using 8K. And naturally, when we do a 500% crop, of course, they have a lot more detail than 4K. It should be the case at the very least. But I do think that the detail level now has shot up quite a bit on the X100 Pro. There is definitely a little bit of sharpening happening. I can see some haloing and artifacting right around the edges. You can also see it even after you do compression probably. And look, the Xiaomi, it goes for a very natural approach, and it's something that I do appreciate, and I'm pretty sure many others will too, because it's an approach that ensures, at the very least, even though you might not get as much detail as the X100 Pro, you're also not going to get any artifacting whatsoever. Other than the ultra-wide camera, this is again 4K 30, and yeah, I get it, the framing isn't perfect or anything, obviously, because the Xiaomi 14 actually has a wider ultrawide. I did try to adjust it, but it wasn't quite enough, the adjustment that is. So yeah, let's just crop it to 500%. And this, I can tell you without a bloody shadow of doubt, the X100 Pro doesn't really look all that good. It's just, maybe it's overprocessing, maybe it's just the ultrawide's quality isn't quite there with the 4K video at the very least. But the Xiaomi 14 looks so much nicer, so much cleaner. It has some grain. Any ultrawide video will have some amount of grain, especially when you try to crop into 500%, that's gonna happen, no question about it. But the X100 Pro's artifacting is all over the place. It hurts my eyes. Just look at it. Xiaomi 14 is pleasant in a comparison, and that's quite something. Now then, we have low light video. So the X100 Pro, I've already mentioned this before, it has quite possibly one of the best low light video cameras, especially with the main camera. It produces some of the best low light video that you can possibly have. And the Xiaomi 14, if you use night mode video specifically, which only works with the main camera as it should, you can produce basically on par quality. It's very good and it looks stunning on both. You can actually use this and get really good and usable video out of these two phones, and that's quite something for me. On the X100, you don't even have a night mode video. This is just the quality you get. The Xiaomi 14 obviously has a little bit more processing involved with the night mode video and all that jazz, but still, it works, and that is all that matters to me. Now you might be thinking, also, what about all these jokes that are making it in the video? That's on me. Fact is, I took this after returning home from the gym. I just had to finish it off, and yeah, my arms were mostly numb. I couldn't really feel much in there, so I couldn't stabilize them all that much either. Those jerks are, I guess you could call them human error, and that's usually not gonna happen for most people. Alright, now, slow motion. So, interestingly enough, the Xiaomi 14 doesn't seem to have focused. Even though I used tap to focus, specifically on the Xiaomi, I didn't even have to do anything with the X100 Pro. It focuses really well, but on the Xiaomi for some reason it just would not focus on the glass, which is just odd. But regardless, even in some of the areas that I think it focused, it's not particularly sharp. Like, I'm telling you, once again, it's been the same throughout the comparison. 1080p video looks exceptional on the X100 Pro. I don't know what voodoo they're doing, but well, keep it up. That's all I can tell you. Now, the Xiaomi 14 also takes a step forward with slow motion. In the wrong direction, because we have 1080p at 960 FPS, and look, the fact is this, 960 is cool and all, it's interpolated and it looks kind of terrible, to be entirely honest, but the quality drops so much. I mean, it is catastrophically bad. That's the best way to put it. And my question is this, 1080p 960 is cool and all, but are you really going to use this, or would you rather have 4K 120? Isn't that so much better of an option to have? Isn't that so much better with the quality? So that brings us to the end of this comparison, and I gotta say this, there's a lot of things to really consider here. There's no clear winner, at least not in my books, because there's a lot of things that the Xiaomi does really well at a much lower price once again. But there's also some things that it kind of is inconsistent with. For example, the 4K selfie video doesn't look all that good, at least compared to the X100, which looks absolutely balls to the walls insane. Then you consider stuff like log video, like that's absolutely stunning. It almost makes me want to pick the Xiaomi 14. For my personal use at least, that would be the choice, because log video any day of the week, I'll take it. Then of course, you gotta consider this. 4K 30 with HDR looks very good, basically on par with the X100 Pro, but 4K 60 or anything beyond that doesn't get HDR, and then you lose out on a lot of dynamic range. The 4K 60 ultrawide was very good proof of that. So you gotta prioritize, right? Do you want just 4K 30 and log video? Go for the Xiaomi. If you want really good selfie video, if you want, I guess, really good 1080p video, if you want good 1080p 240 slow-mo, then go for the X100 Pro. So that's gonna depend on your priorities. I'm gonna leave it at that, and I'll be seeing you guys sooner with many more to come. Cheers.